Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? Good. I had a very lame response from my graduate students today. I kind of start my Wednesday classes on how are we doing every day. Everybody just kind of like one person said fine, and I was like, well, at least I got one response today. So you all were a little bit more emphatic. So I guess that's being a little bit later in the day, since they start at 9:30. Quick announcement. Quick announcements, I should say. So this is a final reminder. I will not be able to give you this reminder on Friday, but if you are planning on doing extra credit and did not attend Meet the Firms, your window for that is tomorrow for Career and Internship Expo. I guess I've got the browser open up. I hate this window. So anybody ever messed with Zoom and got this window in the way? It's just always perpetually. And the problem is that it doesn't show on YouTube, so nobody's going to see what I'm messing with right here. They're just going to like, what is he doing? He's just moving his mouse around. But let's take a look and see if we can find the specific times. All right, so career and grad school week. So career and internship tech. So it's best says the hours. It says the registration. I wonder if I have to sign into Handshake. Nope, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It does. I don't have to sign up for that. So starting 3 p.m. Hopefully you have time during that window. Just keep in mind that if you do attend, you need to let me know that you attended because there will not be, to my knowledge, there will not be a registration for you. So it's voluntary attendance. But encourage you to do that. And obviously you're on your honor. If you don't attend, please don't tell me that you attended because that would be bad. Also something to think about for the future. We actually have a visitor coming to my auditing class in a couple of weeks, actually about a week and a half. It's his name is Andy Karcher, and he was here at Meet the Firms for Spire Energy. He's going to be talking to my audit class. Now, I say he talked to this class, but we have an exam on that day, and so it's a little bit distracting to have somebody presenting while you're trying to take your exam. So he will not be presenting this class. However, I do have an opportunity for a few students if they want to join Andy Karcher and some of the faculty to join us for lunch right after this class on Monday the 6th. If you are interested in doing that, please let me know. I don't know if I'll be able to accept anybody, but I will consider you as a possibility for joining and may want to express interest. Basically, Andy is in internal audit at Spire Energy. So if you have an interest in pursuing the possibility of internal audit for a future career, that's where I would be looking for your interest and engagement in that. So please let me know if you have any interest in that. Send me an email, and it's going to be. I'll let you know if you would like, if we can get you to come to lunch. It's only going to be about 5 students. We can't do everybody who wants to attend, but if you are interested in one of those 5 students, then I'll send you an invite. So, and plus free lunch. So there's that. That's good stuff. All right, today we've got some stuff going on. So we got NetSuite stuff going on. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Let's get logged in. If you're not already logged in NetSuite, hopefully you know that by now. And if you can't log in NetSuite, that's a bad thing. Uh-oh. That's right. I didn't log in under my email address. That's right. I had to do a long email. So, okay. Anybody get any little bit of hope right there? Says, oh, Dr. Barnes doesn't know his password. We could just be getting a free day. Yeah, just a little bit of hope. No, I just logged in with the wrong email address. So there are some updates. You can go ahead and click this box and click continue if you get this notice. Apparently they had an update session. They canceled the update session, so there's not anything radically that's changed. At least to my understanding, they were supposed to change the demo accounts, but they didn't actually do it. So we're just acknowledging that. Okay, come on. September 23rd is what it said. And apparently that's happened. So I do want to take a little bit quick note about the demo counts. I ran my testing. I ran my protocol to go through everything that we're supposed to be covering today. I did that yesterday. And it has happened in the past that updates have occurred in between the time that I checked to make sure everything's working properly and the time that they actually run the updates. So if I get stumped here of just a few minutes and you start saying, what's Dr. Barnes vamping about? It's like, because something has happened in NetSuite that I did not expect, because I've got these detailed walkthrough notes to make sure that I follow everything and make sure everybody's doing exactly what I want them to do for the assignment. All right, just as a reminder, This is going to be starting our purchasing process. The stuff we are covering today will not be on the first exam. It will be on the second exam. So that's one good reason you want to take detailed notes, because you want to study for the second exam this information. Also, it's going to connect to what we're going to be talking about in about a month. And so we'll talk about what the relevance is. This will actually be fairly consistent with what the purchasing process looks like, but we'll talk about why here in just a second. Okay, so remember when we did our first 3 NetSuite assignments, we set up our company and we did some manual journal entries. Now, feasibly speaking, most of our transactions should not be manual journal entry transactions. Is it possible to do those within a NetSuite environment? Certainly. But what we'd like to do is we'd like to create our transactions based on what we know the transactions should look like and work them into the systems. So the next 4 weeks, or next to 4 NetSuite assignments, not next 4 weeks, but the next 4 NetSuite assignments, we're going to be starting out with a purchasing task. We're going to follow that up with a revenue task. Now, the reason we start with purchasing revenue is we need something to buy, or we need something to sell, so we have to buy it first. So we're going to create the thing that we're going to sell eventually, but we're going to buy it right now. So it goes without saying that if you don't do this task properly, you can't do the next task properly. So this is a sequential process, so make sure you follow along. Also, something that you should be aware of, our final NetSuite assignment, I mentioned this a little bit, I changed the schedule. It will be a replication of these tasks, but there will be additional detail. We've got an entire class period set aside for that. So you want to make sure that you are following along with the processes, not just the step-by-step, but understanding what the intuition behind each of these processes are, because you will need to replicate. So if I go to a particular area, say, here's where we're directing or navigating to, you might want to write down that path so that you know how to replicate that for future assignments. All right. So here's what we're going to do is that we are going to create a new inventory item that we can eventually sell. So we're going to start out by buying the inventory item, and then we're eventually going to sell it. So let's go to our lists. And we're going to go to accounting and items. I'm sorry I did that really quickly. Let me go ahead and put that back up so everybody knows where we're going. I try to go a little bit slower in this. So lists, accounting, and items. Once you get to items, click items. All right, so if we look at this list, we've got a list of entire items, and you may think this is all of our inventory. Actually, this is not, it's not restricted to inventory. This actually can be non-tangible items. As you can kind of see, we got markups listed here. This can be items that are for use in the organization, but are not considered inventory. Anything that we can actually put in the system can be put here. For our purposes, we want an inventory item. So let's click on new item. And as you guess, you can kind of see all of the different types of items here. We got specifically inventory items and non-inventory items. I want to create a new inventory item. So we're going to create an inventory item. So as you can probably figure out, we go to the hyperlink where it says inventory item, and we're going to click on that. So like I said, we want to create an inventory item. Now you have a little bit of discretion in the inventory item. I'm going to create a specific inventory item. What do you say if you cannot in good conscience create the same inventory item that I create? I understand, okay, it is a bit extreme what we talk about, but we're going to create an inventory item. However, whatever inventory item you create, it needs to be a distinct inventory item that we can track, okay? So first and foremost, this is the most important step. We are going to change our form that we use. And the reason why is that some of the required information for this form is not information that I want to track. So let's go over to form, and where it says inventory in the drop-down menu, let's change this over to standard inventory part form. Now, the good news is this will not be a regular task for purchasing. We won't need to change the form, but for this particular process, you do need to change the form for this particular transaction. And when you create the inventory item several months from now, you will need to do the same process. You'll need to create the standard inventory part form, just simply because everything that I've set up in the system is going to be based on the use of this form, not their other inventory form. So please make sure you change the form. That's what we need to note. So custom form or use standard inventory part form. All right. So here's the part where you get to make up your inventory item. I'm going to make up my own inventory item. If you want to do this, I'm honored. If you don't want to do this, I understand. Okay. Here's my name of my product. It's going to be I Love AIS Textbook. All right. And for obvious reasons, that's why we're going to be it. So item name, Let's also go ahead and copy this right here and put it down into the display name as well. Now, as always, we do need to change our company because we're operating out of US West. So make sure you go to subsidiary and you change it to US West. By the way, when I make these changes subsidiary, I'm going to tell you some of these changes will not be necessary. Some of them will be very necessary. The question is which ones are necessary, which one I don't. And the answer is I honestly can't tell you. Every single time we have a change where we have to update a subsidiary, I just change to the US West. Can that affect your ability to conduct a transaction? In some situations, yes. So for safety purposes, we're always going to change our subsidiary to US West, or we're always going to change our warehouse to US 1. So if you ever get into the habit of just going through these, make sure you note that this always has to occur. All right, so change our item to US West. Let's go down, scroll a little bit down. We're going to go to the purchasing inventory tab. Now we're going to do a few things on each of these tabs, but we're going to start with the purchasing inventory tab. The reason why is we have to set up our item first before we can set up anything else. So let's go ahead and where are we going to do this? So let's go to purchase description. So here's what we're going to do for our purchase description. I'm going to type in I love AIS, the memoirs of a Truman State business student. And then go ahead and copy that because we're going to use that somewhere else. You highlight it and press Control C. The first time it may not necessarily work, but you can copy that over pretty easily. All right, we're going to copy that over here in just a second. But let's go down a little bit further to purchase price. And what I'd like to do is for our purchase price, we're going to purchase this. We're going to buy this from our supplier at $14.99. Now, just as a quick question, always comes up is, do we need to fill out all this detail? Answer is some of the detail is really important. Some of the detail is not important. We are skipping a lot of steps that we could go through for time purposes. For the most part, though, we don't need to fill out every single detail. It will tell us what is going to be required. Let's go down to the bottom. So we're down here with warehouses and our location, and you'll notice it gives us a preferred warehouse dropdown. Anybody want to guess what we're going to put in here for a preferred warehouse? US 1, that's correct. So we're going to go to US 1. All right. While we're down here, over here, 2 steps to the right next to warehouses, we've got a sub tab called vendors. Let's click on that. And we're going to set up exactly one vendor we can buy from. And this is going to be, you will need to use this exact vendor, Planning Partners LLC. Part of the reason I ask you to use this vendor is you will notice the subsidiary they operate out of, US West. This is one that I know for a fact that if you choose a different supplier and they do not operate out of US West, you will have a lot of problems moving forward. So that's why I say use this supplier and don't worry about it, because I know for a fact that this supplier will work. If you decide to use another one, you're taking your best chance or taking chances at that. So go ahead and click on add. We could add different suppliers. If we had multiple suppliers for the same item, we could add more suppliers here, but we're just going to use that one because that's going to be an easy task for us. All right. So we have to have had added our supplier, okay, our vendor. Also, we have to make sure that we specified warehouses. You have to do these steps before we can do our next step. All right. So make sure your warehouse is specified, your vendor is specified. Now let's scroll back up. And up here in the main tab, we're on purchasing inventory. Let's go over to sales pricing. All right. And you can probably guess in the sales description, let's just copy what we copied before, the description before. Now let's scroll a little bit down. You'll notice that we have different currencies we can operate in. Since we're operating US and the United States, let's just go ahead and set our base price at $29.99. Now, it's important to note, We specified a cost earlier. That is the cost we purchase at. This is saying the price that we sell at. And interestingly, NetSuite actually has some interesting setups for us. It tells us the base price, which is what our normal selling price is. It actually has options for not-for-profit customers, like if they buy from university in bulk, then they can actually purchase at a discount. And then corporators, somebody who's trying to buy and arbitrage a profit, it actually increases the prices for corporations who are not on authorized purchaser lists, which I think is pretty funny, actually. But we're going to go ahead and let that there. That's all we need to enter is that $29.99, and we need to make sure these autofill. All right, moving back up, let's do some accounting stuff. So on this blue ribbon, move over to accounting. Let's set up our cost of goods sold account. We're just going to use cost of goods sold 5010. For intercompany cost of goods sold account, we're just going to continue using the cost of goods sold specified above. For asset account, we're going to do 1200. We're just going to do a primary inventories category. And then we're going to leave everything else. So the only thing that you needed to change was cost of goods sold. You need to add 5010. And for asset account, you need to add inventory. We don't need to change anything else. So 5010 in cost of goods sold account, 1200 in your asset account. One other small item, and I'm going to admit that part of this is for convenience and part of this is just to annoy Dr. Caden. We're going to make this non-taxable. Because let's be honest, if we could do without taxes, wouldn't all of us just be happier in this world? Yeah, okay. So we're going to simplify, make things simple as possible. All right. So we have updated our purchasing inventory tab. We updated our sales pricing tab. We have updated our accounting tab. Once you've done all three of those tabs, go down here and click save. Oops, don't do that. Save. There we go. It's going to take a second. Now, we already know about the purchasing process. We've created an item. What is the item that creates or starts a transaction process for us? What would be the step that would start the purchasing process, assuming that we are the ones who are making a purchase? What is that document that's created? So first of all, we'd talk about that we'd go and quote and we'd investigate other companies, but we don't really need to do that here because we have one supplier. We know who we're going to buy from. So we're going to buy from that. What are we going to send to them? Send them a purchase order. So we need to create a purchase order. Before we do that, though, I want to check something. And you're going to ask, we're going to go to this, we're going to navigate somewhere. We're going to do absolutely nothing after we navigate there. And you're going to ask, what was the point of that, Dr. Barnes? And the point of it is we need to check a default setting. And it's really important to check the nature of this default setting, because if this default setting is not the way it should be, then we have to fix it. Now, the reason why we're still doing this is that in earlier versions of NetSuite that I used to run a little bit over a year ago, this default setting was different. And I still think it's important to talk about. So let's go ahead and check and look at this. I want to go to transactions, purchases. Oops, sorry, my bad. I apologize. Back up. That's the next step. Let's go to setup. I apologize for that. I know that that's jarring. Setup, accounting. And then we're going to scroll down to accounting preferences. So first thing we're going to do is go to setup, accounting preferences. Now, what we're doing here is this is our NetSuite setup for all of the defaults that we have for the accounting treatment. As I told you already, we're not changing anything, but this is one of the most important things that we need to do before we move forward with our purchase orders. We're going to click on this order management tab over here. And we're going to scroll all the way down to receiving. Now, what does it say right below receiving? There's a box that has no check mark in it. It says bill in advance of receipt. In prior versions of NetSuite, this box was automatically marked by default. Does anybody see a problem with having that box marked by default? What does bill in advance of receipt say to the supplier, to the vendors? It says you can send us an invoice before you send us any goods whatsoever. Is that a problem if you're a customer? So if we have a disaggregated organization, we can have people paying bills for invoices that were for goods paying invoices for goods that were never received. This setting right here, by removing the check mark, is saying you cannot send us an invoice until you've actually delivered on your goods. Now, most vendors are going to be operating in good faith. Most vendors are going to say, we would not do that anyway. We're going to send you the goods, then we'll send you the invoice. But what if you had a vendor that knew about this setting or knew about the situation and knew that you didn't actually check to make sure that goods were received before invoices got paid? And they were really sloppy about that. Could it possibly be a vendor would take advantage of that? That's historically happened, so we know that's the case. So making sure that this is unchecked is saying we are going to ensure that no invoices are received until goods have been received before them. All right, that's what this checking right here. And again, we're not doing anything. We're not going to make any changes here, but I want to make sure that this is unchecked because this is an important operation. By the way, we're going to come back here again for revenue and we're going to check another one. We're going to do absolutely nothing, but we're going to check and make sure a default is currently set because of the way it's set. All right, now I said we're going to go transaction, purchases, and you probably guessed we're going to enter purchase orders. Transaction, purchases, enter purchase orders. Then wait a little bit while the computer goes slow. Talk about everything that's great in your life. It's always good to reflect on the positive. I realize the irony of saying that when you're in AIS. Transaction, purchase, enter purchase orders. All right, so write the purchase order. Now, the good news is we do not need to change forms here. We can just leave it as purchase order form. We can use that default form. There's an interesting point here. You'll notice on purchase order number, it says to be generated. In previous iterations of NetSuite, we had to enter this manually. It's a little bit more convenient for the system to create this. And it did that automatically for journal entries. Does everybody remember that? It created journal entries automatically. What was my rationale behind why that was a good thing? It's a sequential process. If it's a sequential process, we can check and see if there's any gaps and we can investigate if there's a problem. So if I'm doing purchase orders, I got purchase order 110, purchase order 111, purchase order 113, I might say, what happened to 112? And it gives me a place to investigate to determine if there's some sort of malfeasance going on in the organization. So this is a great thing for us. So the system generates that automatically. The data is going to be generated automatically. What we're going to do is we're going to put our vendor in. What was our vendor name again? Planning Partners. So let's just go ahead and start typing that in. And it's going to auto-populate for us. So once you hit that, once you get that name in there, hit tab. It's going to pause for a second because it's going to enter the subsidiary automatically as well as the currency and the exchange rate. So subsidiary is listed, but we need to specify location. What's our location again? US 1. Always going to US 1. All right, let's go ahead and make a quick note here. On received by, let's go ahead and type in the date, 10/15/2025. So anybody guess when we're going to be doing NetSuite 5? Going to be on October 15th, 2025. Okay, that's why we need to receive by that date because that's when we're going to receive these goods. These virtual goods, I should receive. Yeah, receive this. Okay. Let's go down a little bit. And your window may have scrolled a little bit over to the left or to the right, so you may want to put it back to the left. We're going to put in items here, but you'll notice something. This is an interesting default that I've never been able to figure out. It's got two different subtabs, one for expenses, one for items. If we're receiving services, this expense tab, the subtab right here is where we put in those services. Because remember, services get expensed when incurred. We're not receiving services, though. We're going to be receiving textbooks. I love AIS textbooks. So we need to specify that we need items here. Now, why am I spending so much time talking about such a simple click on this? If you forget to do this, you will be frustrated for about 30 minutes. This is me from personal experience talking, by the way, okay? So make sure you click on this item subtab, and then we're going to identify our item. Now, if you typed in I love AIS textbooks and you kept with that, you just type in the letter I, and it's probably going to go to I love AIS textbooks. If you type in something else, you'll need to specify what your inventory item is. But we're going to tab over. It's going to put in the description, the rate, the quantity, and everything we need to note. Now, we currently have none on hand, so we need to have some on hand so we can sell them eventually. So let's go ahead and specify a quantity greater than 1. We're going to sell more than 1. Let's go ahead and buy 30 of these. And once you buy 30, it should specify and update the amount. Should be $449.70. What is that? That's 30 times $14.99. Because remember, we bought at $14.99. So that actually is going to be our calculation for that. All right, this is going to be the only thing we're going to purchase, so let's click on add. Now my computer's frozen. Oh, there we go. All right, just took a second. So 30 copies of our textbook for $14.99. Regardless of what it is that you created as your inventory item, it needs to be $14.99 for 30 items. That's what I would like to see, so I can check consistency. All right, let's go ahead and check a few things. Let's click on the shipping subtab first, okay? So we don't need to change anything here, but I would like to make sure that our shipping address is correct. Remember, we set this up a long time ago back in our first assignment. Make sure this is correct. I guess it wasn't that long ago. It was like 4 weeks ago. So we're on the warehouse manager for Team Client Card Games, or whatever your company name is, Turo Drive, so on and so forth. All right, let's go to billing. Now, we don't need to change too much here. We would technically check and make sure our vendor address is correct, because we want to make sure that it's coming from this correct warehouse. But the only thing we're going to change here, by the way, I love this address. 1421 Wiffle Ball Drive. It makes me wonder if there's an actual Wiffle Ball Drive somewhere in this on this country. Let's go to change the terms to 110 net 30. Or yeah, 110 net 30. So we talked about these terms before. This is our cash discount. We're going to take advantage of this because we're going to pay within 10 days of receipt. Technically speaking, we're going to pay within 0 days of receipt, which that should give us like a full discount, like 100% discount, right? Yeah. All right. So we're going to pay within 0 days of receipt, but that'll be easily within 10% window. All right. We've set up a purchase order. What do we think we need to do? We're going to save it. Click on save. It's going to take a second. Once we get to the screen where it says transaction confirmed, we're going to have successfully created our first document in NetSuite. Which takes a lot longer. Okay, there we go. Confirmation, transaction confirmed. Now, an interesting point, do not click on what I'm about to show you, okay? Do not click on about to show you, but there's a couple things I want to show. This is a sequential process, as we know from our purchasing process. Same thing for receiving. NetSuite is set up that we can follow this sequence if we want to. So what would be the next step after we issue that purchase order? What would be our next step as the customer in this situation? Receive goods from our vendor. Can anybody see a receive button on this window? Yeah, so we can come back to this document, which we will in about a month, a little bit over 3 weeks, 3 weeks exactly, maybe 4 weeks. I don't know, I can't do math. But we're going to come back to this, and we're going to click on this receive button, and we're going to go to the receipt of goods. Now, is there a different way to do it? Yes, but the sequential process, we should take as much advantage as we can. And one of the great pieces of news is that if we ever get lost, our purchase order is listed right here in recent records. Remember I told you you'd be coming back to this? Yeah, this is going to be kind of default if we need to have a problem. We go back to the home screen. Now, before we finish up here, we've got one last task to do. You have a deliverable for the assignment today because you're getting 5 points for the assignment. So what is your deliverable? I want you to hover over the printer icon. Just hover over it. Now there's two options here. The first one is going to be print, and the second one's print GL impact. We're going to select the first one, print. And when you click on print, it's going to open up a new window, which is going to show us what the document looks like. And oh, by the way, if we hadn't gotten rid of that American flag, this would still have that gaudy picture in the background. It couldn't read anything. This is what I would like it to look like. So this is going to be your submission. However, this is really important, okay? Transactions that are actually within the NetSuite window default to a specific type. You will notice that it says printform.nl. NL is not recognizable under Brightspace, which means that if we want to check your work for grading, we can't actually open that document here. In fact, I think it's only open through a few specific programs. So I want you to create a PDF file for this image. Does anybody know the easiest way to create a PDF file when you're in this frame? Yep, so we can actually convert it to PDF pretty easily, print to PDF. So click on the printer icon. You will notice that destination, one of the destination is save to PDF. I like preferably Microsoft Print to PDF. Now make a note of this. This is really important. For every document that you create, which you will be creating multiple documents through this framework, you need to convert them to PDF files because you're going to be submitting these to Brightspace, and my GTRA will not be able to open .nl files. In other words, if you submit a .nl file, you will not get credit for that submission. So please make sure you convert everything to a PDF file. Write this in bold letters, underscores. If you're typing this down in instructions, put it in bold, italicized, underlined, put it in a different color if you need to. Whatever it is, reminder this. Now, I'm going to remind you a whole bunch. I'm going to remind you when we get to this last step, we have to convert this to PDF, but this is really important. All documents should be submitted as PDF files. All right. Once you've converted that to a PDF, save that. That is your submission to Brightspace, and we are done for another NetSuite assignment. Say adios to NetSuite for a few weeks. We're going to be coming back to it, but it'll be waiting right here waiting for us. All right. We've got 17 minutes left. Let's see if we can quickly dash out these homework questions, and then we'll be done for the day. So which of the following is not an activity in the purchases and payments process? So this looks just like the question that we had for the revenue chapter. So obviously it's going to be all of these are activities in the payment process, right? Everybody just said E is the default because the Dr. Barnes class, it's always going to be E. We're always going to circle E. Well, let's go through these. Request prices. Is that one of the purchase and payment process items? Yes, it is. Receive items. Is that a purchase and payment item? Yes. Pay for items? Yes. Bill customers. No, we don't have customers in the purchasing payment process. We are the customer, okay? We're actually dealing with vendors. So D is not something in the purchase and payment process. This is an important piece. It's very easy to get to overlook, but when we're dealing with revenues, we're acknowledging customers. We're dealing with purchases, we're acknowledging vendors. We don't send bills to customers as part of the purchasing and payment process. That's a revenue step. Which activity results in an increase to accounts payable? So this question is going to come up a lot, or a variance of this question. This is just a liability recognition question. In fact, we have another question very similar to this one. All I'm asking is, what has to occur for you to book that first journal entry to accounts payable? Remember that journal entry? I guess I should probably pull up the slides. I'm going to look at the slides for a little bit of other stuff anyway. So let's go ahead and take a look at the slides. So everybody remember this journal entry? This first journal entry that we actually booked to purchase our inventory, we booked that payable. What event has to occur for this transaction to be recognized? What are we looking at? That is going to be the receipt of items. We have to receive the items. Now, definition of receipt depends on the freight on board, the shipping terms, but regardless, it's the receipt of items. It's an important recognition point. All right. Question number 4. Which of the following is not an example of an application control? Now, I've got a story behind this particular question. In the old version of this book, this question was wrong. It had no examples of application control, and it was trying to, it had no examples of application control, and trying to say E was all the examples of the application control. So we complained and we said, no, that's not the way this works. You got this wrong. So then they changed one of the answers. The system requires passwords as a new answer. The problem is that 2 of the answers now are correct answers to this question. So employees making disbursements cannot modify purchase orders. That's a control, but is this an application control? No, what do we call that? So it's a general or access control. It's a general access control. By the way, to make a distinction between these, because we didn't talk about this in much detail, and I apologize for this. Whenever I use the word employee about what an employee can have access to, that usually implies an access control. Whenever I say what something the system does, that implies a access. I said, yeah. So employees access control. System is an application control when the system's activity is. Now, C looks like this could actually be a application control right here. But keep in mind, this is not a control. This is actually an example of a business rule system requiring passwords. So we would say that this is not an application control either. If anything, this would be the front end for what happens for an access control, because this creates an access control because an employee cannot access the system without a password. So these are both kind of, this is the beginning of an access control. This is an actual access control. So if you circle B, you're correct. If you circle C, you're correct. If you circle both, that's advanced thinking right there. All right, question number 6. Which of the following is a resource in a purchase and payment structure model? Let's just go through these. Is employee labor a resource? It is. Is it something that's part of the purchase and payment model? No. That's not something we specifically talked about. We said it's outside of the model. We could consider it to be a component that's related to it. That was one of my first slides that we talked about, but it's not part of the model itself. What about receipt of goods? What do we call that? It's an event, okay? Paying by check, that's kind of an event, okay? That would be a cash payment or cash disbursement. Inventory, is that a resource? Is it part of the purchase and payment model? Yes, so D is our answer. What is supplier, by the way? That's an agent, okay? Holding that in mind. We got an agent here. Looky here. We answered it in this previous question. We got our supplier down here. Is supplier in the purchase and payment model? Or purchase and payment process? Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, it is. That's who we buy from. Which of the following is an event in the purchase and payment model? So what do we say cash is? It's a resource. Inventory is also a resource. What about employee? That's not what we talked about. What is that? Agent, good. Cash disbursement, is that an event? Yes, it is. It's one of our events that's critical to the purchase and payment model. So it's not none of these options, it's D. Question number 9. This question is going to look really familiar. Which of the following events would indicate the recording of a purchase in AIS? Remember I said that we're going to have a similar question to one we talked about. This is basically the same as question number 2, I believe. Yeah, liability recognition, same answer, okay? When we receive the goods. When we receive the goods, we recognize the liability to pay those goods. By the way, there are 2 transactions in this journal entry, okay? This one is the one we're talking about here. This is our liability recognition. When do we eliminate the liability? We don't ever limit the liability. We have an obligation forever, all right? It's forever and ever. So this is saying that we eliminate the liability when there's cash that's being credited. What does a credit to cash imply? We're paying it. We're making a disbursement of cash. So when we make payment to the vendor, that's when we eliminate the liability. That's where we say that we recognize the cash disbursement, we eliminate the liability from our system. So we create a liability, we eliminate a liability this week. That's the cash disbursement recognition. All right. Scrolling way down because I didn't want to bore you all with multiplicities again. Did anybody notice that I skipped the multiplicities this time? Did anybody just say, thank God? Okay. Yeah, you may thank me now. I didn't want to give you busy work for this one, but on the hand, I think I just said thank God and said thank me. I'm not God. Yeah, sorry, I apologize for that. But thank goodness. There we go. Thank goodness. I am goodness. We keep in mind that you do have some responsibility for still being able to recognize the multiplicities. I just decided that it was kind of redundant because we've talked about them so many times already. Even though we didn't actually talk about the multiplicities, you do still have responsibilities for understanding these multiplicities up here. But let's go down to 24, 25, 26. There we go. So assume you're drawing an activity BPM diagram of the process, okay? So we're doing purchasing process. Which of the following is not true about your diagram? So let's just go ahead and take a look at the diagram. Basic diagram. It's this one right here. Pretty easy to understand, right? Which of the following is not true? Let's go ahead and look at these. So I'm not gonna go back. I'm just gonna leave the diagram up here. The issue purchase order task occurs before the receive purchases task. Is that a correct statement? That is a true statement, all right? I want to skip B, all right? I want to skip B and I want to skip C, but I want to move down to the other ones, all right? The process ends when the vendor is paid. Is that true? Legitimately speaking, that makes sense, okay? That's when we eliminate our liability. That's when the vendor receives what they did. That should end the purchasing process. That's recognized as a payment, okay? So A and D are pretty obviously correct. What about B? The purchasing task can be modeled as a looping task to show multiple purchases following one purchase order. So basically what we have here is it's saying that we could receive products and then we could issue another purchase order to the same vendor and receive more products and then make a single payment on multiple purchase orders. Is that chaos? Is that craziness, or is that a feasible task? I think that seems completely reasonable, okay? Even though we didn't specifically talk about this, this is where you kind of utilize your utilitarian logic and say, Yeah, we could issue multiple purchase orders and we could just pay on a single purchase order or pay on the multiple purchase orders, so single payment on multiple purchase orders. So B is completely and totally sensible. What about C though? C says the process starts when the customer places a sales order. What's the word there that's problematic? Customers. And first of all, customers don't place sales orders. That's a revenue document. A customer would place a purchase order. Technically speaking, we're the customer. So we could say, well, we're the customer. So that's correct. But would we issue a sales order if we're the customer? No, we would issue a purchase order. Okay. So there's two words there that are potentially problematic. They give a little bit of clarification. For C is a very clear answer. All right. So for the final question, 27, you could use either this diagram or this one's actually a little bit more convenient. So slide 8 or slide 9 in the diagram. So it says, assume that you're drawing a collaboration activity BPM diagram, which collaboration is just basically saying we have multiple pools within there, multiple entities that we're dealing with. So we have our supplier up here. We have us down here as Sunset. We're dealing with interactions between two entities, two or more entities, I should say. Which of the following would not be message flows on the diagram? So just look at the diagram and answer the question. Would purchase order be a message flow? So yeah, we would convey our purchase order to supplier. That's a pretty obvious conclusion. What about delivery of the purchase? Do we want our goods? Yes, hopefully they deliver the goods to us. This item delivery is a sequence flow right here. Check or cash disbursement. Do we have to make payment of this? Yes. So we're going to disperse these items. So then we have inventory update. Do we need to communicate when we update our inventory, or does the supplier need to communicate when they update their inventory? Is that a communication that has to occur between entities? No, inventory update is a solitary process. It's a single entity process. That is not a message flow, okay? So it's not a message flow that we have to consider. It's not listed up here, so D is our answer. D is our answer. So close to saying all of the above, and we can't quite do it. All right. I hesitated to include this question. I actually thought about moving this next question out after all the chaos with that we experienced this semester, but I still think it's a valuable activity model. So assuming that you didn't do first day complete, let's go ahead and draw an activity model using BPMN for the process you followed when you purchased your textbook for the current semester. So let's go ahead and think about the activities that we would include in a BPMN diagram, okay? So first of all, your textbooks are going to be predicated on the courses that you're teaching. Has anybody gone out and just bought a textbook for the fun of it? Says, you know what? I'm not taking auditing this semester, but Dr. Barnes keeps talking about it. I'm going to go buy an auditing textbook. Just drop a couple $100s on that and see what happens. No, that's going to be something we would not do. Most people are not going to do that. So we need to actually determine what textbooks are required. All right. Also, is there a decision about where you want to make purchases from? So there's actually a couple different dynamics to the decision. There's 2 different places in town you could buy from. If you go to a really large university, there's like dozens of places you can buy from. So you can go ahead and buy there. Also, what has become increasingly prevalent over the past 2 decades? Could you purchase them virtually? Either the actual textbooks themselves or online editions of the textbooks, okay? So that's actually a decision point that we need to verify. Let's validate. And then once you make your purchase, what do you need after you make your purchase? The textbooks, okay? You're going to have to make sure you see those textbooks. It's all good and well to spend money, but you want to get something back for your money, so you receive those. So a diagram, pretty simple basic diagram, would look something like this. Determine what texts are required based on the class you're taking. Determine where to purchase, where you're going to buy from the bookstore, or you're going to do online sources. You could include an activity diagram. You could actually include a note about the textbook, the nature of the textbook itself. If you want to buy an online edition, or if you want to buy a virtual edition electronic book, or you want to buy an actual physical textbook, that's a possibility. And then you need to receive your text. So this is kind of a good, simple diagram. If you had some variation on this, you're in the ballpark. Again, if I ask a question like this, I'm looking for a general understanding of the activities, something that's in this ballpark. If you added activities, if you reworded the activities to some of the description, don't care, okay? All I'm looking is that you got the fundamentals down. All right, last question for the day. So we have a narrative about the tablet store. So tablet store recently opened to sell iPads and other tablet computing devices. It purchases tablets directly from the manufacturers. To order tablets, it submits a purchase order to the manufacturer electronically. Each purchase order could stipulate several different models of tablets from one manufacturer. The manufacturer typically delivers to the store 2 weeks after they receive the purchase order. Tablet store pays for each shipment within 30 days of receipt. If there are multiple purchase orders of the same manufacturer, tablet store occasionally combines payment, issuing one check for multiple receipts. All the tablets are drawn on one bank account. All right. lot of information there, and I went through it quickly because we don't have a lot of time. But let's deal with the fundamentals of our UML diagram. If you forget everything else about the UML diagram, think about the three things that you know have to go in every UML diagram. The three important entities, okay? We don't have any conceptual structure in this diagram. So what are our three entities again? Resources, events, and agents, all right? What are the resources that are going to be in this diagram? They're going to be the products, or you could actually specifically call them tablets if you wanted to. What do we exchange tablets for? Cash, good, okay. We've got our agents, which we know are going to be the manufacturer, the vendor, the supplier, whatever you want to call it, okay? And then whoever handles the purchasing for us, which is going to be our employees. And then we got our events. Now, we talked a little bit about this on Monday. Do we need three separate events in this scenario? No, for every purchase order, there's always going to be a purchase. So we don't need to specify a separate purchase item. We can just have two events, a purchase order, and then a cash disbursement. So we could have a diagram that looks something like this right here, or purchases, purchase order, whatever you want to say. They're going to be kind of synonymous. So hopefully your diagram looks something like this. Now let's go ahead and look at one item real quick before we wrap up. So it says tablet store occasionally combines payments, issuing one check for multiple receipts. So look at here, we got a cash disbursement. A cash disbursements can be associated with zero purchases or many purchases. Is that implying that we could have multiple receipts on a single cash disbursement? The maximum of many? Yes. So that's one thing we need to clarify when we actually look at that. That was the important thing that dictated this multiplicity. What if the vendor policy specified that a cash disbursement can only be for one purchase? What would be the change in the multiplicity here? Be 0 to 1. Could have a maximum of many of 1. All right, last part of the question I asked you to see because we wanted to talk a little bit about relational databases. How do we determine accounts payable? How do we determine accounts payable? Do we have that information given this diagram here? Because this is kind of setting up how we'd set up a relational database. So the purchases represent all of our total purchases that we make from this manufacturer, right? Is that the sum of all accounts payable? Yes, for the most part, but what do we do when we eliminate accounts payable? What is that step called, elimination of accounts payable, generally speaking? A cash disbursement. So if I took the sum of all my purchases and subtracted all cash disbursements, would that give me accounts payable? That's how I would set it up in a relational database. I would start with this table, I would subtract the amount for accounts disbursement, and I would be able to get my balance out of there. Now, there is a caveat there. You could make a note here. What about accounts payable that are no longer present due to returns or something along those lines? That is an important point to make, is that this would not be comprehensive, especially if I have an existing accounts payable that has not yet been returned. But for the most part, our purchase balance minus our cash disbursement balance should give us a very close approximation of what our accounts payable should be representative of that particular detail. All right. We have Excel on Friday as well as our next AI discussion. So I'll see you all then. Have a great day.